you've been sending out 100 resumes and hearing nothing but digital silence, I want you to stop for a second. Take a breath. Because if you're feeling like you're shouting into a void, you aren't failing, you're playing a game that's already over. I've been in this industry for 15 years. I've seen cycles come and go. But what's happening right now in 2026 is different. I'm seeing high-quality candidates, people with incredible track records, facing 6-month search cycles. We're talking 26 weeks of uncertainty. That's a 20% increase just since 2023. And it's not just you. The average time to get an offer has stretched to 83 days. That's nearly 3 months of interviews, assignments, and follow-ups. Why? Because 83% of global enterprises have handed the keys to AI. You aren't being rejected by a person. You're being filtered by an algorithm that doesn't understand your value. Let that number sit for a second. 83%. If your experience and your hard work are no longer the keys that open the door, we have to ask a hard question. What is the hidden logic that's actually locking you out? Because the old apply and wait method isn't just slow anymore, it's structurally broken. Here's where it gets really interesting. I've talked to dozens of recruiters lately, and there's a massive signal mismatch happening. You're spending hours on your resume, but a hiring manager is spending an average of 2.5 seconds on it before they hit reject. 2.5 seconds. They aren't looking for your degree from 10 years ago. They're looking for a reason to say no because they are terrified. In this post-efficiency market, a bad hire for an executive role costs a company 3 times your annual salary. If they hire the wrong person at a $200,000 salary, that's a $600,000 mistake. They aren't looking for standard excellence anymore. They're looking for system outliers. The AI tools they use are designed to find anomalies, the people who don't just do the job but who transform the system. Yet, 43% of organizations admit their AI tools are failing to find the right talent. There's a value realization gap. They need you, but they can't see you because you're speaking the language of the old world. Honestly, when I first saw this recruiter data, it changed how I think about the whole thing. Most people are working harder to fit into a box that the machine is programmed to ignore. So if the old wisdom of staying for security and being a compliant top performer is actually becoming a liability, what are the people who are doubling their income right now doing differently? Let's talk about the strategy that's working. I want to introduce you to a group I call the portfolio professionals. These are the people who stopped selling 40 hours a week to one boss and started selling high-stakes results to 4. Look at the data on LinkedIn. Mentions of fractional roles exploded from 2,000 to over 110,000 in just 24 months. We're seeing a massive shift toward fractional C-suite specialists. These people aren't working more hours. In fact, they're often working 30% fewer hours than they did in traditional roles, but they're generating $500,000 a year. Why? Because companies are pivoting. They don't want the overhead of a full-time executive when they can hire a strategic partner for a strategy sprint. The number of active fractional leaders has doubled to 120,000. Mid-market firms are realizing they don't need you to sit in a chair from 9 to 5. They need your judgment for 5 hours a week. Here's the part that most people have completely backwards. They think security comes from one steady paycheck. But in 2026, security comes from having multiple streams of income based on your specific expertise. These portfolio professionals aren't working harder. They've mastered a specific wildcard that's rewriting the rules. They've moved from being a laborer to being an orchestrator. And that brings us to the most important variable in this entire equation: AI. Now, this is the part that changes everything. We've all heard the headlines about AI taking jobs, but let's look at what's actually happening. AI isn't coming for your job title. It's coming for your labor hour contract. If you're paid for your time, you're competing with a machine that works for free. That's a losing battle. But if you're an orchestrator, someone who commands AI to multiply output, your value just went through the roof. Professionals with verified AI skills are now commanding a 56% salary premium. That's double the premium we saw just a year ago. Think about this. Productivity in sectors like finance and tech is growing nearly 5 times faster than in other sectors because of AI. But here's the catch. Real wages in those sectors only grew about 4%. Where is that extra productivity going? It's going to the bottom line of the company, or it's going to the orchestrators who know how to capture it. The gap between a 27% productivity gain and your 3% raise is where your $500,000 Gambit lives. If you stay in an input-based model where you're paid for the hours you work, you are effectively being taxed for your efficiency. If you do your work twice as fast with AI, you just get given more work. But in an impact-based model, you get paid for the transformation you deliver, regardless of how long it took. So how do you claim that gap starting tomorrow? How do you move from a laborer to an outcome owner? You don't need a new degree. You need a new contract with the market. Here's the 3-step blueprint I've seen work for people making this transition. First, you have to move from being an executor to a system architect. Stop talking about what you did and start talking about the systems you've built to manage high-stakes edge cases where AI fails. Candidates who demonstrate judgment and critical thinking are commanding a 23% premium over those with just technical skills. Your value isn't in the routine, it's in the exception. Second, build what I call a failure portfolio. AI is great at being perfect. Humans are great at navigating messiness. Show the market where things went wrong, how you diagnosed the failure, and how you orchestrated a recovery. That's the signal recruiters are actually looking for in those 2.5 seconds. Finally, target strategy sprints. Instead of looking for a forever home, look for high-margin fractional roles where you can deliver surgical expertise. Fractional leadership mentions are up 400%. Companies are desperate for people who can come in, fix a specific problem, and leave. This isn't easy. It requires a mindset shift. But the people who figured this out, and they're the ones getting the callbacks, they're the ones commanding the premiums. Your safe salary, that steady paycheck you've been clinging to, is actually the ceiling. It limits your potential while leaving you exposed to the next algorithm update, outcome ownership. That's the floor. It's where your real security begins. So, which one are you choosing this week? I know this is a lot to process, but you've got this? If you're sitting across from me right now, that's exactly what I'd tell you. The game has changed, but now you know the rules. Let's get to work.